Today we're looking at types of nucleic acids. There's DNA, RNA, and ATP. First we'll look at DNA. This is a diagram of a cell, and it's a complex cell like you would have. And so DNA is found in the nucleus, which is found inside of a cell. So in here you have your DNA, and you probably recognize this as a chromosome. You've probably seen that on TV or in an earlier class. If you unwind that DNA, you're going to get this long molecule that looks like this. And so DNA is a polymer. Remember, poly means many, so it's made out of many repeating units. And so here's one of the units, and here's another. And if you look at just one of these strands, here's what it looks like. And so here's a unit, and then here would be another unit, and then here would be another monomer. These monomers are called nucleotides. So it says nucleotide here. This is probably a better picture of this. You've got a nucleotide, and in this case, for nucleic acids, the nucleotides, the monomers, are actually made up of repeating units. And so each nucleotide is made up of a sugar, a base, and a phosphate group. And so you can see this part, or if you want to look at it this way, here's this double-stranded DNA. This outside part is this part. It's made out of sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate. So this whole thing, and then another one and another one and another one, makes this outer part, the sugar phosphate. So it would make this part. These inner part, the rungs, are made by bases. So here's a base, and it would connect to another base. And here's another picture of it. We've got these units. Here's a nucleotide, and here's another nucleotide. So we've got a sugar, a phosphate, and a base, and the outside is made out of these repeating units, sugar, phosphate, and again over here, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate. So the outer parts of the DNA, we call those the backbone because they're very strong. They're not in the middle like your backbone, but they are very strong. So these are the sugar phosphate parts. The bases are what sticks inside, and they're not super strong because they're connected by hydrogen bonds in here. DNA is a double-stranded polymer, and the D stands for deoxyribose. So this is deoxyribonucleic acid. But I'm glad it starts with a D because double also starts with a D, so that will help you remember. The nucleotide is the monomer. Again, it's made out of a sugar. The sugar for DNA is deoxyribose. And here's the phosphate, and it's got nitrogenous bases. For DNA, it's A, C, A, G, C, or T. So here are the different DNA bases. Each DNA nucleotide has one of the following bases, T, C, A, or G. And so these are what they look like. You certainly don't need to memorize this. I'm not going to quiz you on having you match this to cytosine, at least for now. But you should absolutely know the bases that are found in DNA, T, C, A, and G. And sometimes I'll call them a base, and sometimes I'll call them a nitrogenous base because, look, they all have nitrogen in them. Nitrogen, nitrogen, nitrogen. They've all got nitrogen. So this is just one half of the double helix. Nucleotide monomers form long chains, the polymer DNA. Sugars and phosphates make up the backbone. Again, don't think of this as the strong middle. This is the outer part, and we call it the backbone because it's the strong part. So this would be the backbone, and there would be two. And that part that I just drew is made out of sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate. The bases make up the rungs, so that's this part sticking out here. And that's not as strong. This is a part of DNA that you can actually unzip when you want to replicate or when you want to read the DNA. And these are actually all the same length, but it's hard to draw them that way because it's this twisted ladder. So here are the bases. The bases make up the rungs, the part that you would actually climb if this were a real ladder. You join these two strands together, and it's a double helix. So it's double-stranded. And that's different from RNA, which is single-stranded. DNA is the hereditary material for all living things, all things with cells. RNA is a little bit different from DNA in structure as well as function. So take a look at this. There's an O and an O. This thing is the sugar ribose, and that gives RNA its name, ribonucleic acid. So ribose has an extra oxygen or hydroxyl group compared to deoxyribose. Let me go backwards and show you a picture of DNA while I'm thinking of it. And let's see, that was RNA. This is DNA. Okay, so here's a picture of DNA, and look at this. Here's the sugar, and this is, ooh, I didn't mean to do that. Oh man. There. So, so here's the sugar, and it's the sugar ribose, except look at this. It's missing an O, so it's not the sugar ribose, it's the sugar deoxyribose. And so that's one of the differences between DNA and RNA. And so this is where we were. So ribose has one extra oxygen compared to deoxyribose. DNA has deoxyribose. So ribose is the general sugar, and you can tell it's a sugar because it's got an ose in its name. Deoxy means you take out an oxygen. So this one is RNA. You haven't taken out the oxygen. It's still there. RNA has the base uracil instead of thymine. So here's uracil. So for RNA, you can have A, G, C, or U. That's the difference between DNA and RNA as far as the bases go. So if you look at a nucleotide of either DNA or RNA, you can tell by this that this one's RNA because it's got an extra O. And you can tell that it's RNA also because this one happens to have uracil in it. Could have also had thymine or sorry, I didn't say that. Could have also had adenine or cytosine or guanine. Could not have had thymine. So if you see a long list of bases and they include T's, ATT, CGC, GGT, that's DNA. If you see a long list like UUU, A, C, UU, G, AU, something like that, if it's got U's and no T's, then it's RNA. You'll never see T's and U's together unless it's a pretty bad mistake. RNA helps translate DNA, a DNA code, into a protein, and you are made out of proteins and protein products, so that's a really important function. RNA is usually single-stranded. Sometimes it will fold over on itself, and that's usually a regulatory function, or there's a special type of RNA called tRNA that does that, but it doesn't have that double helix shape. These are the nitrogenous bases of DNA or RNA, so these are found in both DNA and RNA. This one's found only in DNA, that's thymine. This one's found only in RNA, that's uracil. And again, I'm not going to give you a quiz where you have to match these things up. So with all these pictures, you would have to know that that one's uracil. I'm not doing that. I will give you a quiz and say, what are the nitrogenous bases in DNA? And you would have to tell me C, T, A, G. And I'll tell you which one, I'll ask you which ones are in RNA, and you'll have to tell me U, C, A, G. The last one, we've done DNA, we've done RNA. The last nucleic acid that I want you to know is ATP. This is for cellular energy. And again, we're going to come back and revisit these nucleic acids because they're so important. ATP is used by cells for energy. So for example, when you contract your muscle, you're not taking sugar over to the muscle and the muscle doesn't split the how can I say this? The proteins that make your muscle actually move are actin and myosin. The actin and myosin don't take a fat molecule or glucose or something and split that and use that energy directly. Instead, there are these special organelles that are in your muscles called mitochondria, and they'll break down the sugar and they'll make ATP for you. And then your actin and myosin, the part of the muscle that actually does the contraction, your 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 actin and myosin will use ATP directly. So this is a picture of, or the structure of ATP. It's called adenosine triphosphate. And so the tri means 3, so there are 3 phosphates. So you may remember this as looking like a nucleotide, but this probably should look different. Now tell me, is this a nucleotide of DNA or RNA? Hopefully you recognize it as a nucleotide of RNA because it's got an extra oxygen. It's adenine, so this base is adenine. And then the weird thing is that this is what you would consider, oops, this is what you would consider a nucleotide. So ATP, first of all, is not a polymer. It's a monomer. It's a nucleotide. But the weird thing is that instead of having just one P, it's got three Ps. If you had just one P, it would be called AMP. If you had two Ps, it would be called ADP, D for di. So just one P would be adenosine monophosphate. Two is adenosine triphosphate. Three, oops, did I just say that? So one is adenosine monophosphate, two would have adenosine diphosphate, and having all three makes ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So this is made of a nucleotide with three phosphate groups, and that's the important thing for you to remember. And we're going to spend a lot of time on this one later. And baby is crying. Yes, I am done.